If it's Friday, with his presidency in peril and a campaign in crisis, President Joe Biden sits for his first network interview since last week's debate debacle as he hits the trail in battleground Wisconsin, telling supporters he is staying in the race. Plus, a landslide election in Britain, a new prime minister, and a new era for America's closest ally, as voters give the left-leaning Labour Party a decisive mandate, ending 14 years of tumultuous Conservative Party rule. And a record-breaking holiday heat wave puts more than 100 million Americans on high alert, with temperatures climbing towards 120 degrees in some places, while fueling wildfires in California. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington. President Biden's allies have made it abundantly clear that he must prove his ability publicly for voters to see if he wants to rescue his candidacy. Now, that effort by the president begins in earnest today with his first network interview since last week's disastrous debate and a crucial battleground rally. Right now, President Biden is speaking to an overflow room of supporters in Wisconsin after telling crowds just a moment ago that he wasn't going anywhere, while criticizing those who are trying to push him out of the race.
We had a little debate last week. Can't say it was my best performance. We love it, Joe. But ever since then, there's been a lot of speculation. What's Joe going to do? Is he going to stay in the race? Is he going to drop out? What's he going to do? Well, here's my answer. I am running and going to win again. I'm the nominee of the Democratic Party. I'm the nominee of this party because millions of Democrats like you just voted for me in primaries all across America. You voted for me to be your nominee, no one else. You, the voters did that. And despite that some folks don't seem to care who you voted for, well, guess what? They're trying to push me out of the race. No! Well, let me say this as clearly as I can. I'm staying in the race. I'll beat Donald Trump. I will beat him again in 2020.
The president's most definitive public comments yet that he is staying in the race. And also today, President Biden is sitting down with ABC News in an interview that will air in prime time. He'll have to answer directly for his debate performance, his campaign's lackluster response, and the growing number of voters, donors, and supporters who fear his candidacy is no longer viable. It comes as CNBC reports that wealthy Democratic donors, including an heiress to the Disney family fortune, say they will no longer fund the party until President Biden ends his campaign. All while Democrats on Capitol Hill signal they're nearing a breaking point due to the campaign's failures.
We needed a boost from Thursday. We didn't get it. And the campaign has been very, I think, arrogant in their response. We want to know what their plan is to win this election and turn these numbers around. And if they don't have a plan, then I think we have to move in a different direction.
So you're to be determined, but you're not saying you're absolutely supporting him.
I don't think we can at this point. The point is to win the election.
Meanwhile, accounts of President Biden's struggles behind the scenes continue to plague his campaign and his presidency. An anonymous senator told my NBC News colleagues, quote, the country saw at the debate what those of us who have had personal interactions with him have all known for the last 2.5 years. Also this, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey put out a statement pushing the president to consider stepping aside if that's what voters want, saying, quote, over the coming days, I urge him to listen to the American people and carefully evaluate whether he remains our best hope to defeat Donald Trump. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli is on the ground in Wisconsin, where President Biden spoke earlier today. He has been reporting this story out since the debate. And also with me is CNBC political finance reporter Brian Schwartz. Thanks so much to both of you for starting us off on a very busy Friday. Memoli, I have to start with you. Look, this was a fired up Joe Biden. We heard his defiance. The campaign is billing today's speech as the beginning of a July push. What were your key takeaways today?
Well, Kristen, I just found this speech so fascinating because as you ended there with the new comment from Governor Healy of Massachusetts saying that the president should listen to those voices, to the American people about whether to stay in the race, the defiant tone from not just the president but his whole team is he is listening to those voices. He had an enthusiastic, energetic crowd here cheering him on, saying they support him going forward. He really basked in that adulation, staying out, shaking hands. He even came back after working that rope line to say he won't soon forget this day. And that really speaks to something of a disconnect, a clash really that's being set up here, at least as far as the Biden team is, between sort of the party elites, those campaign donors who are, frankly, never have been true Biden believers to begin with, who now saw this moment of significant weakness. And we can't understate that, Kristen. This was a devastating debate performance, and some of the public polling is bearing that out already. But that he still sees a path to victory. He still sees, as he laid out in rather blunt terms, the voters of the Democratic Party across this country in primary after primary nominated him to be the nominee again, and he's not just going to give that up. It was also, though, worth noting, we heard some of the most really strong rhetoric directed at Donald Trump that we've heard from this president so far, ending his speech by saying we need to exile Donald Trump politically, talking about what that immunity decision from the Supreme Court earlier this week might mean for the country if Donald Trump were put back into the Oval Office. And so that speaks to another effort here on the part of the Biden team. When he struggled in his 2020 candidacy in that crowded Democratic Party, he would often try to raise the stakes by making this not about him versus the Democratic Party and the candidates running against him in the primary, but him against Donald Trump. And we're seeing that yet again right now, Kristen.
We certainly are, Mike. There's no doubt about that. Let's talk about the big interview tonight, his first television interview. The stakes of this interview, Mike, for all the reasons you just mapped out, could not be higher. Talk about how he's preparing and what we can expect to see tonight.
Well, that's what with the volley back from those who are really concerned about President Biden moving forward and what that might mean in November would be that he gave that fiery speech off the teleprompter, and that there is not necessarily concern that the president can't deliver a set of remarks with, fire and energy when he's reading it from the teleprompter before a very supportive crowd. It's what is he like in the Oval Office on a long day during a crisis? Can he answer tough questions from a tough interviewer like George Stephanopoulos? So I think there are a lot more people who are going to be interested in seeing what that conversation is like and how the president is able to answer some of those tough, direct questions more than what he does on the campaign trail. And it goes without saying, Kristen, there's very little margin for error for President Biden going forward. It's not going to be enough to just have one strong speech, one strong interview. Every misstep going forward is going to be scrutinized, and that's where the Democratic critics of him at this point are concerned, that they don't want to see the focus on President Biden. They want to see it on former President Trump and what they believe would be a catastrophe if he's put back in the Oval Office.
You're absolutely right. Every single word, every single move will be scrutinized of President Biden's. Brian, let me turn to you. You've been all over this reporting about donors. Mike, of course, talked about the polls. That's one data point. But the donors are a major data point as well. I spoke with one Democratic ally to the president who said, look, if the money dries up, that's the ball game, basically. Tell us what your latest reporting is as it relates to donors.
Well, Kristen, listen, there has become this outright rebellion in the Democratic Party, in some cases, by major Democratic donors and financiers against Joe Biden. Let's just not, mince words here. And one of them that emailed me on July 4th was Abigail Disney, the heiress to the Disney family fortune. She told me, I intend to stop any contributions to the party unless and until they replace Biden at the top of the ticket. If Biden does not step down, the Democrats will lose. Of that, I am absolutely certain the consequences for the loss will be genuinely dire. I mean, and that is a stunning set of comments from Disney to me. And it's really some of the more stronger remarks that I've received from donors. But again, it's just one step above some of the sentiment we've been hearing throughout the last few days.
You're right. And the fact that it's on the record, the fact, again, that it hits at the heart of the campaign, We're talking about the money, and that really is the core of it. We also, of course, saw that you had reporting on Reed Hastings, who's another major Democratic donor. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Reed Hastings is coming out and saying that it's time for Joe Biden to step down. But one of the things that was missing in his comments is to exactly what does that mean for Mr. Hastings himself. And that's the key here for Biden and the Democrats. The truth is that, donors can come out and say anonymously or on the record to me that Joe Biden needs to go. But to something we're kind of touching on here, the key to this is that if the money is going to dry up, and that really could be a serious problem for both Biden and the party at large. And there's only so many people who are willing to go on the record and tell us that. And that is critical. But on the other hand, as Mike kind of just touched on here, with the interview coming up on ABC, the donors are going to be watching that interview very, very carefully in every single public appearance going forward. And the way it's been described to me is that if it's anything short of a home run, both the interview and the statements by Joe Biden from now until the convention, they are going to continue to be concerned, and that the actions, which is key to this, could start ramping up a little bit by many more donors if this continues for the president.
And Mike, what are you hearing from your sources on all of this? The fact that you have donors who are pulling out cash, drying up, the concern about that, as Brian says, they're all going to be watching this interview very closely tonight.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Kristen. As one prominent Democrat put it, somebody with deep connections to the donor community, he said there is concern. They are going to make this decision not on emotion, but on data and on the money flow. And he said those are very often very much linked. And so the question is there this kind of grassroots support for the president that might sustain him in the absence of those high dollars? Remember, President Biden was the first Democrat to raise $1 billion, the first presidential campaign of any party to raise $1 billion. He was on track to potentially raise almost $2 billion when you combine some of those affiliated super PACs. The Biden campaign has been very careful in reading out some of these strong fundraising numbers in the last few weeks to try to give us the sense that the grassroots of the party is still with him. But we haven't gotten the kind of precision in delineating what are some of those big dollar events that were still on the books that they're using to pad the small dollars that are still coming in and what aren't. So that's going to be an important thing for the Biden campaign to keep saying going forward. And it is really striking, Kristen, as I was talking to some voters here, they do think that there is that same disconnect, that this is all a manufactured panic on the part of those who were never supporters of Biden to begin with to try to get him out of the race, and that they still stand firmly behind him. But the question is, are there enough of them going forward?
That is one of the key questions we are asking. Fantastic reporting. Thank you so much, Mike and Brian. Really appreciate it. Joining me now on set is Julia Manchester, national political reporter for The Hill, Democratic strategist Amisha Cross, and Republican strategist Rick Tyler. He is also an NBC News political analyst. Thanks to all of you for being here. Julia, let me start with you. Set the stage heading into tonight. Mike Memley talked about the fact that the stakes could not be higher. Voters are going to be watching. Donors are going to be watching very closely. What does President Biden need to do in order to start to turn the page, if that's even possible?
This is a make or break moment for President Biden. He needs to do two things. Number one, he needs to explain what's been happening over the past week. We've seen a number of these stories since the debate come out, talking about what the president's cognitive and mental abilities have been over the past, 2.5 years or so from Democratic sources. He needs to put those to bed if he wants to get through this. He needs to talk about some of the explanations he's given for his performance during the debate, including being jet lagged, despite the fact he was traveling he got back from his overseas travels 12 days before the debate. So there's definitely a lot of explaining he needs to do. But, I think Mike Memley talked about this in his report. This isn't the end for Biden. He's going to have to do a lot more to really make up for the damage that's already been done.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Rick, pick up on that point. You've been in campaigns. You know what it's like when you have that moment, that feeling of we're down, are we actually out? Is this recoverable? I mean, as Julia is saying, he has to do more than tonight's interview.
I don't have any happy news. Cognitive decline, number one, is not recoverable. It gets worse, and it is sad.
If that's what it is.
If that's what it is. And The moment does not come tonight. The moment already came. It was in a debate. People are not deciding whether Biden can get through the next press conference or the next interview. They were deciding whether he could get through the next 4 years. That test came last week during the debate, and he failed that test. I don't think it's recoverable. And the White House is acting, in my opinion, unseemly and undignified, as if Joe Biden was some sort of racehorse, and we're gonna race into Wisconsin. We're gonna go do this and that, and some people, other Democrats, are suggesting we'll do town halls. Well, why don't we hike him up Mount Hood, jump him out of an airplane? Like, this is completely undignified, and I just don't see that it's recoverable. And the final thing, as you are well aware, is that there's a phenomenon in the media called blood in the water. You watched it when Governor Andrew Cuomo resigned. It just was not going to go away until he resigned. And this is not going to go away. This is going to dog Biden in the campaign from now until Election Day. And I don't see how he can prove that we didn't watch what happened in the debate.
Amisha, pick up on that point, and specifically this idea of how the campaign, how the White House is handling it, because some Democrats have privately expressed frustration to me that there's nothing to see here. The poll numbers are dropping, but not by that much. And it was one debate. We can just turn the page on that. There's a frustration among some Democrats that the White House and the campaign is not being straight with them.
Well, I think that the moment is a summation of events. It's not going to just eradicate itself by however the interview goes tonight. And I think that the president and his campaign team are aware of that. I do concede that in the days post the debacle of the debate that we all watched, the campaign should have had him more frontal. They should have been able to react more quickly. They should have understood that at that point, the American people, and millions of them watched, in addition to billions of people abroad as well, saw this as a really flailing moment for the president. And that because it had been in the ether for a while, most of it from conservative sources, that this was a president who wasn't all there, that he had some cognitive decline, that this wasn't necessarily going to be helpful. To a point that was made earlier, we do not have proof of said cognitive decline. All we have now is proof of a really bad debate. That doesn't mean that you should pull out. But if your campaign cannot get it together and get it together quickly, then we're going to have a different discussion. And I think that the campaign team he currently has proven themselves not necessarily the most helpful to meet this moment, and that's a dangerous place to be.
Well, and that brings me to something that The Economist, an editorial in The Economist, let me read you all part of it. This was from yesterday. They write, "It was agony to watch a befuddled old man struggling to recall words and facts. His inability to land an argument against a weak opponent was dispiriting, but the operation by his campaign to deny what tens of millions of Americans saw with their own eyes is more toxic than either, because it's dishonesty that provokes contempt. Mr. Biden's claim that this election is between right and wrong is ruined by the fact that the existence of his campaign now depends on a lie." Julia, those are incredibly tough words. Are you hearing amongst the president's allies them echo similar sentiments, which is sort of the crux of what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're hearing that from Republicans, obviously, but Democrats privately. And we get the sense that the number of Democrats that are going to come out and publicly echo that could be growing. Because, it's one thing to talk about this in a political sense of a campaign. The guy needs to win. Democrats need to win down ballot. But also, and Amisha talked about this with the foreign audience, our allies, our adversaries are watching. And there's a real question as to America's strength under Donald Trump and Joe Biden and the choice we've been given. And there's a question about the questions over those cognitive abilities and, whether that could be taken advantage of.
Yeah. Speaking of, you take me to a soundbite from Jens Stoltenberg, who, of course, is the head of NATO. Let's listen to what he has to say about this.
Do you truly believe that President Biden is mentally and physically fit enough to lead the biggest nuclear-armed ally for now and for the next 4.5 years? And in your dealing with him recently, have you noticed any decline in his condition? Thank you.
Also, I have worked with President Biden for several years, also before he became president. That has been very good cooperation. I met him just a couple of weeks ago. We had good meetings in the Oval Office.
Amisha, that was a little bit of a dodge, but it proves the point that Julia is talking about. Our allies are watching very closely.
No, absolutely. And that was an exquisitely poor response. Nobody's going to have faith after seeing that. I I think that this president has more than proven himself. We saw his reactions with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've seen his reactions and his pushback against Israel's invasion of Gaza. We've seen those conversations and him be on the front lines of some of what I would consider in the modern era some of the biggest issues of our time. One debate performance does not eradicate his decades worth of experience or his experience serving in this present day debacle we've seen across the globe when it comes to the rise of authoritarianism. However, I do think that the onus is on him to prove that he is up to the job for the next 4 years, and his campaign has to do a much better job of ensuring that people have faith in that.
And Rick, I mean, the Biden campaign has made the argument, the president has made the argument from the beginning, frankly, going back to 2020, that Donald Trump is a threat to the country's democracy, that that's how high the stakes are. And so it does raise the question, is he the strongest person? If you look at the polling right now, Vice President Harris is in striking distance of Trump. She's about 2 points out. She actually does better than Biden. This is what former President Trump had to say about the vice president. Take a look.
Kick that old broken down pile of crap. Yeah, it's a bad guy. He just quit, you know. He's quitting the race. Is that right? Yep, I got him out of the race. And that means we have Kamala. I think she's going to be better. She's so bad. She's so pathetic. It's so amazing. It's just so bad.
So the Biden campaign fired back, talked about how disrespectful those comments were to the vice president. What I see in those comments is that he might be a little bit nervous about running against a Kamala Harris. It gets more complicated all of a sudden.
It's all an unknown. It is very, I mean, look, we've never seen this before. I've never attended an open convention in either side. I have to say I would love to see one, but this is, right now Biden is a known. Kamala Harris is a known unknown. So what I do know is right now, currently, this race is out of reach. Biden will not beat Trump as of this moment. And I don't see that changing. And the Democratic Party has got to face up to that reality that they're not going to change those numbers. And if Donald Trump is an existential threat, and by the way, I've applauded Biden's achievements on foreign policy. I don't agree with those domestic policy, and he should be lauded for that. But is he going to suffer the indignity of losing because he's not able to campaign effectively? The Democratic Party is going to have to decide that. And then they got to decide if they do replace him, are they going to replace him with someone who can actually win votes and beat Trump? And that's going to be tough because the convention is controlled by the progressive wing of the party, and that's not going to attract people in the middle.
And Amisha, that's what's so fascinating. I mean, you do have some of the president's allies, Congressman Clyburn, for example, very clear he does not want to see the vice president jumped over if, in fact, President Biden does make that very difficult decision to step down.
No, absolutely. And I think that it would be ahistorical to see a vice president get stepped over in this process. First and foremost, all of the fundraising thus far would automatically be hers. We're also talking about the fact that, like, the entire finish the job campaign is essential to also have the vice president finish that job. And as a black woman, it would be quite frankly disgusting to see the first sitting vice president who happens to be black pushed aside for these candidates who have not been tried, tested at all. And I think that, former chairs of the CBC, current chairs of the CBC, other black elected officials and non-black elected officials should fully understand why this is important, specifically because the black community is the largest base and voting bloc that is consistent for the Democratic Party.
All right. Well, we'll have to see how it all unfolds. Unfortunately, we're out of time. This was such a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much, Julia, Amisha, and Rick. Really appreciate it. Coming up, millions across the U.S. are under heat alerts with temperatures forecast up to 120 degrees in the west and near 100 in the mid-Atlantic and southeast. We're tracking the very latest holiday forecast ahead. But first, from a heat wave to a landslide. Conservatives in Britain are out of power for the first time in 14 years after a wipeout in yesterday's election. My Sky News counterpart, Sir Trevor Phillips, joins us to break down the results and to tell us what it means for America's closest ally. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. It was a day filled with pomp and celebration after Labour's landslide victory in yesterday's UK general election. Labour leader Keir Starmer began his day meeting with King Charles at Buckingham Palace, where he formally accepted the role of UK Prime Minister, officially ending 14 years of the Conservative Party in power. He then travelled to 10 Downing Street, where he was met by a crowd of supporters. as he delivered his first remarks as prime minister in front of that famous black door. Earlier today, President Biden spoke by phone with the new prime minister and congratulated him for his victory. The two leaders will meet in person in just a matter of days when President Biden hosts world leaders for the annual NATO gathering. Joining me now is NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez outside 10 Downing Street. A little late there, so it's a little hard to see that famous door, Raf, but thanks so much for joining us. So this was really a landslide victory for Labour. What did we hear from the new prime minister, and what were your takeaways?
Well, Kristen, talking to voters here over the last couple of days, it was very, very clear people wanted change. They were exhausted. They were frustrated with the Conservative government, which, as you said, had been in charge for the last 14 years. But the last 8 of those 14 were a period of unprecedented political chaos in this country since that 2016 Brexit referendum when the UK voted to leave the European Union. Since then, the Conservatives cycled through 5 different prime ministers in 8 years. You'll remember Boris Johnson forced to resign after that scandal where it emerged he broke his own COVID lockdown rules and attended illegal parties here at 10 Downing Street. So the public wanted change. Keir Starmer is not a man who is brimming with charisma, but he does project competence. And he made very clear he understood the message and he understood the mandate from the British people. Take a listen.
You campaigned for it, you fought for it, you voted for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now. Today we start the next chapter, begin the work of change, the mission of national renewal, and start to rebuild our country.
And Kristen, the new prime minister, speaking outside Downing Street a little earlier today, said the work of change begins immediately, and he wasn't kidding. Within an hour or so, we started to see his new cabinet ministers walking down this street, the new foreign secretary, the new defense secretary, the people who will be shaping policy, coming here and getting their marching orders from the new prime minister of the United Kingdom. Kristen.
Just extraordinary, and you're there watching it all unfold. Thank you so much, Raf Sanchez. Really appreciate it. Great reporting. For more on this historic election, I'm joined now by Sir Trevor Phillips, presenter of Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips at our sister network, Sky News. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Kristen, it's a great pleasure to be with you. And I heard you say that, well, it's a sister program. I regard you as a big sister here.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, listen, I am honored to have you on the program. It's really fantastic. This was an historic victory for Labour. Tell us about it.
Well, as Raf said, it was an extraordinary moment. And to give you an idea of how remarkable this achievement is, Keir Starmer is only the 5th Labour leader in history to win an election of this kind from opposition. It is an unfamiliar experience. The last time this happened was in 1997. Tony Blair won in a landslide. So you have to be at least 45 years old in this country to have voted in an election where this happened. And of course, the scale of it is extraordinary. We have 650 members of parliament. Keir Starmer now has 412 of them under his control. So he can pretty much do what he wants. And for the Conservatives, it's a disaster. It is their worst performance, bar none. And this is a party that has existed for over 200 years.
Well, as Raf said, he's wasting no time getting to work. But obviously, the agenda is robust. What the people there want to see him change and deliver on the economy. Certainly at the top of that list, what are you going to be watching for? What are the top issues that he's poised to tackle there?
Yeah. Well, the top issue, of course, is always the cost of living. Mm-hmm. And that will be the business of his chancellor, a lady called Rachel Reeves, who is the first female chancellor in the United Kingdom's history. And she's going to have to tackle the economic problems that we have. Our debt is about 100% of GDP. Inflation's fallen recently, but of course, that doesn't mean that prices aren't going up. Unemployment is okay, but it is still on the line. And of course, the issue of immigration, we have, right as you have at the southern border, across our channel, small boats bringing refugees, asylum seekers, and others who are not, who pretend to be asylum seekers and so on, from France. And that has caused a great deal of anxiety in this country. And indeed, it's partly responsible for the result, because a third party, led by a man called Nigel Farage, who will be familiar to some Americans, friend of Donald Trump, is really the person who is responsible for this astonishing result, because what he did was to divide the Conservative vote largely on the issue of immigration, and that is why we are where we are. So Keir Starmer is going to have to attend to all of those issues, and there will be no honeymoon. It's worth saying that he won this landslide on only 34% of the vote, which is the lowest, I think, share for some time by a winning party.
You know, it's interesting because he is obviously set to meet with President Biden in just a few days for the NATO summit. The two have spoken by phone, the president congratulating him. I don't have to tell you, we are in our own election year here. How much is riding on this visit, this NATO summit for the new prime minister?
Well, I think he has to show that he is a prime ministerial material. Bear in mind, he has never occupied office. He only became a member of parliament in 2015. Before that, he was the director of public prosecutions for the United Kingdom. I got to know him very well because I occupied a similar office, and we worked together a lot. But politics is a new game to him. So he first has to show that he can do politics, that he can be a statesman. And I think that the NATO summit will be an opportunity to do that. Of course, as you say, Kristen, you have your own troubles. And I suspect that Mr. Biden will probably want to see Sir Keir Starmer as an ally. All over the Western world, politics is moving in the opposite direction from the center-left. So actually, these two men right now are probably the only or the most prominent representatives of center-left politics in the developed world.
It's such a fascinating and important point, particularly when you think about the fact that President Biden is running against former President Trump, who is conservative, considered to be a representative of the far-right movement in this country, certainly. How do you think Prime Minister Starmer would work with Mr. Trump if he were to be reelected? Would that be a challenge?
Well, it's a great question. And Keir Starmer has answered this question in the way that you would expect a politician to answer it, by saying that he can't decide who the American electorate decides to put in the White House, and he will work with whomsoever. And in any event, the relationship, the special relationship, is one between states rather than persons. And in that sense, he is correct. However, let's be clear. His foreign secretary, who is a man called David Lammy, again, our first black, I should say, foreign secretary, a man whose parents hail from Guyana and who attended Harvard, actually, and is a friend of the Obamas, at one point said some very rude things, which I'm not going to repeat on a family channel, about Donald Trump. And Mr. Trump knows that. Now, you know, there may be Trump 2.0, who is a guy who doesn't do vengeance and who doesn't do coming after his enemies. But if he is true to form, that will be a little bit of a difficulty. Having said all of that, the truth of the matter is there are bigger issues than the personalities here. There is Putin. There is the Middle East. And I suspect that actually, if there is a President Trump and a Prime Minister Starmer, they will find ways of holding their noses and getting along.
And I do have to ask you about one of the biggest headlines that we've been discussing here in this country. Of course, that debate performance by President Biden, raising questions about his ability to serve another 4 years. I'm curious if you can take us inside your conversations there in the UK. How much do people there care about what we all saw in the debate stage last Thursday?
We care about it a lot. Your election is the most important election in the world. It's, by the way, not the only important election. There's ours. On Sunday, France will elect a new parliamentary majority. It is expected that the largest party there will be the party of Marine Le Pen, the leader of the hard-right National Rally. They may not form the government, but like Farage, they will be extremely influential, and whoever is in government will have to some extent, dance to their tune. So your election is very, very important to us. We pay a lot of attention. I'll be absolutely frank with you. I think most people here were pretty stunned at the performance of President Biden. It is very hard to see from here exactly what this means, but I heard some of your discussion, and I have to say it becomes pretty clear from here that it's hard to see how, unless he somehow gets past that evening, and I don't see how that happens, that we will be contending with a President Trump, unless the Democrats decide to do something dramatic.
Yeah, it is day by day, minute by minute. That is for sure. Sir Trevor Phillips, we cannot thank you enough for your insights and for joining us. I do hope you will come back soon. Really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. It's been lovely to talk to you. And by the way, say hi to Raf, who's an old friend.
I will. I absolutely will. He did a tremendous job setting this whole conversation up. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Well, after the break, millions across the country are facing a potentially record-breaking heat wave. How the heat could impact the wildfires blazing in California next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Parts of Texas are bracing for Beryl. It's now a tropical storm with 70-mile-per-hour winds. Forecasters warned that it could intensify again to hurricane strength after moving back over the Gulf and parts of southern Texas. Meanwhile, 125 million Americans are under heat alerts nationwide, with scorching temperatures expected through the weekend. Death Valley could reach 130 degrees next week, which would be near the record for the hottest temperature ever recorded anywhere in the world. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins me now. So, Bill, Beryl has continued to weaken throughout the week. Is there any concern it could strengthen in the coming days? What are you tracking?
You never give up on these storms, Kristen. I mean, we've been through enough of these things, and the water in the Gulf of Mexico is just so warm. So if conditions set up just right, this could explode right before a landfall. And that's what we'll be nervous about right until Monday morning when it finally makes landfall. So it's over the Yucatan right now. We're waiting for the new update from the Hurricane Center. That comes out in literally minutes from now. So this has been the past path. It's about to head over the water, out into the water of the Gulf. It looks like the circulation is regenerating a little north of that line, so that could adjust the forecast ever so slightly. And then we're going to start talking about all these little movements over the next 2 days, because the slightest wiggles and wobbles is the difference between Corpus Christi getting hit, or Victoria, or getting closer to Houston, or maybe down to Brownsville. So that's why we care about all these little things that I'm talking about. It's still moving pretty quickly. It's only going to have roughly about 48 hours to intensify over the very warm water of the Gulf. So Saturday, it's trying to get its act back together. Then on Sunday, it should have its act together enough to start increasing in intensity. Now, there's a big difference. If it goes further to the north, up towards, say, Houston or Victoria, has more time over the water, probably be a stronger storm. If it heads more for Brownsville, South Padre Island, it would more likely be a weaker storm. So that's a big key to the forecast. And this trend is more to the north. Right now, we're pinpointing Corpus Christi to Victoria. That's probably where the new forecast is going to be from the Hurricane Center. And they'll likely still have it making landfall as a Category 1. Regardless of the intensity and the wind damage, we are going to have a lot of rain from this. This is going to be a problem with inland flooding Monday right into Tuesday. And these heat headlines are beyond ridiculous. I mean, this is easily the hottest we've been on the West Coast and the East Coast. We're getting only close to about half the population of the country under some kind of heat numbers. And it's been insane today, from Raleigh to Washington, D.C. Raleigh hit either 105 or 106. Why is that important? Well, the all-time hottest temperature in Raleigh is 105. We may have broken that today. We're waiting for the official word. And at one point in the shade, it felt like 118 degrees in North Carolina. That's insane. Right now, it's 112 in Phoenix, and we're waiting to see how hot we get in Northern California. We could come close to that all-time record high in Redding. And you just get the idea here, because it's just day after day of this. And the thing we'll watch Sunday, Monday, Tuesday for Vegas, can they break their all-time hottest temperature of 117? 118 would do it. I mean, this is just crazy. I mean, coast to coast. And D.C.'s no treat today either, as you know.
I know. I was going to say it was hot here, but looking at those temperatures, my goodness, we got it easy. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. I know you can continue to track that for us. Really appreciate it. Well, the intense heat is fueling wildfires that continue to burn in California right now. This is the French fire in Mariposa County. Authorities say it has burned more than 800 acres and is just 5% contained. The Thompson fire in Northern California is about 50% contained, although it has already burned through nearly 3,800 acres since Tuesday. In all, crews are battling more than 3,200 wildfires that have burned more than 145,000 acres in California alone right now. That's according to state authorities. Meanwhile, in Hawaii, rebuilding efforts are finally beginning in Lahaina, 11 months after the deadliest U.S. fire in more than a century ravaged that historic town, killing more than 100 people. For the bigger picture, I'm joined now by Jennifer Gray Thompson. She's CEO of After the Fire USA, which supports communities rebuilding after wildfires. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So give us the big picture here. Your organization's work has expanded in recent years. How much and why has that been happening?
So we actually started in 2017. I live in the North Bay of San Francisco, and we lost 8,900 structures in 24 days, and 43 people died in October of 2017. And that kind of fire behavior had never really been seen before. We thought we were sort of like the only ones where that would happen to, but we soon learned that we had opened the era of mega fire. About 13 months to the day, actually exactly, is when the Camp Fire happened in Paradise, which is in Butte County, by the way, if people are not catching how much that county has actually undergone in the fire they're currently experiencing. And the Woolsey fire happened as well in Malibu, also on the same day. It became really evident to us, especially in 2020, when we had the worst wildfire season on record, that something more had to be done. We had been doing work already, helping every new community sort of learn. You know, we were teaching our lessons forward. We were sharing all of our, whatever we had learned, because FEMA and our national systems are really set up for wind and rain. And mega fire was new to them too. And so we've had a long journey over the past nearly 7 years, and we've had to then expand into Oregon, Colorado, California. I'm consulting in Texas, and of course I've been working in Maui since I've been consulting since 2 days later, but I've been on the ground there for several months.
Do you, at this point in time, feel as though the response from the federal government has been robust enough? What more would you like to see there?
Well, you know, that's a complicated question because it depends upon the fire in many ways. You know, they were on a learning curve as well. And so what they knew in 2017 is completely different from what they knew when they had to encounter the Maui fire. The Maui fire was really fortunate to have the most experienced FEMA administrator, Bob Fenton, to actually go in there. He's ours as well in California. So he had already had a lot of experience with mega fires and had a very robust response. But, you know, for people on the ground, when you've never been through it before, nothing can ever feel like enough. But I have actually been very impressed with FEMA's willingness to sort of bend to the will and the needs of the people of Maui in a way we don't normally see. And I've been very impressed by that. And I'm hoping that it actually helps our mega fire communities that come after.
Should insurance companies be doing more to help people rebuild, to help these communities that are still dealing with the devastation and the aftermath of these fires?
Well, you know, I consider my constituency every mega fire survivor, every mega fire leader. And so I'm always going to say yes. There are things that can be done. And there is, like, the IBHS is a nonprofit actually funded by the insurance companies. And we know scientifically that if people actually clear out 0 to 5 feet from their home, change out the vents, they have a much better chance of surviving a mega fire. Nothing is fireproof, but there are innovations coming out that can help with not only fire, but really addressing a lot of the multi-climate peril issues that we're all facing, and often in unexpected areas. That Texas had a mega fire of over 1 million acres in February was very unexpected, but they've been in a mega drought, and we just came out of ours in California 2 years ago.
All right, Jennifer Gray Thompson, thank you for joining us, and thank you for the critical work that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, it's the economy. We're breaking down today's jobs numbers. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. We got some fresh economic data today that investors are hoping will help pave the way for the Federal Reserve to begin cutting interest rates. The economy created about 206,000 new jobs. That's according to the June jobs report. The unemployment rate ticked up to 4.1%, topping 4% for the first time since November of 2021. The slowing job growth combined with cooling inflation is fueling speculation that the Fed could begin cutting rates as early as September, which could boost economic activity and ease housing costs. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans joins me now. Christine, so great to see you. Thanks for being here. So let's talk about that. It seems like we're starting to see signs of a cooling jobs market. What are the implications, especially as the Fed considers whether or not to cut rates?
Yeah, and Kristen, cooling is a good thing. I mean, the job market has been so strong. It's been too strong almost, really sparking concerns that all that job creation, that tight labor market where there'd be even more jobs created if you had more people to fill them, that was even fueling the inflation story. So this 206,000 you can see down from last month, that was an important little moderation that so many people had wanted to see. And that 4.1% unemployment rate finally ticking above 4% for the first time in just months and months, also showing potentially that things are cooling off. These are still very good numbers. These are still enviable numbers for any kind of job market, but they're not too hot. And that is exactly what folks want to see, especially because the Fed has had interest rates high here for a very long time, trying to slow things down and moderate things. And so it looks like these numbers feed into that idea that the Fed maybe can start thinking about cutting rates later this year, Kristen.
All right. Well, we will have to see. Everyone waiting with bated breath, as always. Christine Romans, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Good to see you. Coming up next, we have new details about the latest round of ceasefire and hostage release talks with new signs of promise. We'll explain. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. After months of little progress and stalled talks, a senior Biden administration official now says there has been a, quote, breakthrough in efforts to negotiate a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. The official says a new response by Hamas to the negotiations allowed the process to move forward after the militant group appears to have shifted its position on a ceasefire. Yesterday, during a phone call between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the two leaders discussed the details of that agreement. Key negotiators are expected to meet in Doha in the coming days. The first phase of the deal would mean a pause in the fighting in Gaza and the release of a number of hostages held by Hamas, in particular women, those who are ill or injured, and men over the age of 50. That includes Americans Hirsch Goldberg Poland and Keith Siegel. Administration officials are cautioning the deal is not done, adding they are doing everything they can to finalize an agreement. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv and filed this report.
So it is another round of hostage negotiations that looks like we're starting to see here. There's a lot of optimism coming from Washington. We heard from Washington people in the Biden administration saying that there was a breakthrough, that Hamas had softened their position on that same proposal that the Biden administration had been promoting at the end of May, calling it Israel's own proposal. And that was later enshrined in a United Nations Security Council resolution that passed last month almost unanimously. Well, now it looks like, according to Israeli authorities and the U.S. and Hamas, who spoke with Hezbollah today, Reuters quoted Hamas as saying that they actually had already agreed to this deal. But I spoke with two Israeli officials this morning. They said that we should temper our optimism, and they said specifically that this wasn't a breakthrough, that this is actually the beginning of a process that could last for several weeks. Now, if there is a deal, that would be a massive breakthrough. It could free those remaining hostages in the Gaza Strip. There are thought to be about 120 of them. Many of them are already thought to have died. It would also free many Palestinian prisoners who are currently in Israeli prisons. Those numbers have yet to be decided. And it would also, perhaps most crucially to the entire world who's been watching this situation, bring a measure of peace to the fighting in the Gaza Strip. That remains the main issue. Hamas has said from the beginning they will not agree to any hostage negotiation deal that doesn't include a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops. The Israelis, particularly led by Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, have said that they will not compromise on their intention of totally destroying Hamas and its military capabilities. They will not leave until Hamas is completely destroyed. Of course, that's something that Hamas is very unlikely to sign on to, but this is the central fulcrum of this disagreement, and it's one that hasn't wavered ever since the last time there was a successful deal, all the way back in November. So now we've reached a familiar impasse. There's high expectations on both sides, and it's going to be up to the Israelis now to decide whether or not they're going to agree to the proposal that was just issued by Hamas.
Our thanks to Matt Bradley for that report. We will be back on Monday with more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press on your local NBC News station. I'll be joined by potential Trump VP pick Senator J.D. Vance and Democratic Congressman and Senate candidate Adam Schiff. We hope you'll join us. NBC News Now coverage continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.